welcome Reverend Tom Pitman.
I want to tell you that I am tickled to death to be here with you. As I was saying when we prayed in this morning, one of the things that I'm grateful for this community is when I walk in, there is such an energy here of love and community. And I don't see it in every other center I walk into. You are special. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you. Now, I got to tell you, I'm also a little bit anxious. Well, I'm more than a little bit anxious. It's not that I haven't spoken before, because I have many, many times in my life. But there's a difference when you're just going and speaking somewhere and then when you're following Reverend Cindy. You see, I know you all are used to her. When I started ministerial school back in 2014, Reverend Cindy was one of the first people I met. And I saw how dynamic she is and how talented she is and how she commands a room. And I said, boy, I want to be like her. And now I get to follow her and speak to you. She says, I'm going to entrust my community to you, Tom. And the secret words were, and don't screw it up. No, she didn't say that, and I know she would. I know she would. But she did share with me that the last month that you all were talking about oneness, and you covered things like paradigms and peace and possibilities. Well, this month's theme is diversity and inclusion. And I thought, okay, how do I tie those together? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that's a big subject. But what kept coming to me is we're surrounded by paradoxes in life. And these go beyond oneness, and they go beyond diversity. They go beyond peacemaking. But what we want to do and what we want to be are peacemakers. We learned Jesus spoke that message at the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers. And that's what we're called to be, is peacemakers in this world. So we want to be peacemakers. How do we do that with some of the paradigms we face in life? So I thought, well, I'll talk about that today. My talk is entitled The Paradox of Life. And there are paradoxes. But it's always good to start with a definition. What is a paradox? Now, stop. I know what a couple of you are thinking, because I would have been thinking this myself. A paradox is not two doctors. That is not what we're talking about. All right. A paradox is a situation or a person or a thing that has in it simultaneously contradictory values, contradictory features, contradictory qualities. And to be a paradox, they can't just contradict once in a while. They have to be continuous. They have to be persisting, let's call it. All right. Well, let's start with a couple of paradoxes as an example in our world. And we are all faced with one every day. In fact, you're inundated with it. You don't even realize probably anymore how much you get it. But it's the marketing that we run into, and what is it? Stuff equals happiness. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere you go. You got to have the newest whiz bang, I call them, or you just can't be happy, whether it's a car, whether it's a house, whether it's furniture, or whether you're changing something. It's got to be a little bit better and a little bit different, or you just can't be happy. Now, and I remember to turn my phone off, but I have a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge, and the funny thing happened to me last month. Now, I bought this on March 31st of 2016. And it was, at the time, the newest whiz bang that Samsung had to offer. Well, my holster broke. I always wear it on my belt. So I stopped at my trusty Best Buy, and this very nice young man, this very nice young clerk came up to me. He may have been 25, 26, at the most. I said, I need a new holster for my phone. He said, what is it? I said, oh, it's a Galaxy Samsung S7 Edge. And he says, oh, we don't have any more of those holsters. He says, I may have an old case around here somewhere. He said, but that phone is out of date. And I went, I haven't missed a robocall in years. How can it be out of date? So I said, all right, well, thank you very much. I got in my car and went home. And I said, I've got to find one somewhere. And I, in fact, did, obviously. But it piqued my interest. So I got on the Samsung website. I thought, how could this phone be out of date? It's not even quite 3 years old. Do you know how many new versions of a smartphone Samsung has issued since March of 2016? 2 versions of the Galaxy S8, 2 versions of the Galaxy S9, 3 versions of the Galaxy S10, and they've got a 4th version coming out in June. 7 versions already in 3 years. I am way out of date. Can I be happy? Yes. Sure, I'm happy. Because what do we know about happiness? What do we learn in this teaching? Happiness comes from within. It doesn't come from the stuff. Now, we enjoy this stuff. I'm not saying don't buy new things. What I'm saying is that does not create our happiness. What Ernest Holmes said in The Science of Mind is our happiness comes from our ability to be grateful. And it comes from our ability to be grateful for all the blessings we have. It's like that old gospel hymn some of you may have heard about, count your blessings. Look at what you have to be grateful for in your life. You're here. You got out of bed this morning. Most of you had food to eat for breakfast. You have somebody in your lives to love, in most cases. All wonderful things to be grateful for, and they can't be purchased. Well, the food can maybe be purchased, but most of the stuff can't be purchased. Now let's talk about some of the paradoxes, though, in our spiritual world. One of the biggies that you hear about all the time, omnipresence. God is omnipresent. In everything, created everything, the creator of all, the source of all. God is everywhere. It's all God. And it's all good. But each of you is an individualized expression of God. You know, okay, Tom, now what are you saying? We're all one, or we're all individuals? Yes. Both. It's a paradox. It's a paradox. We have some other paradoxes. One of the things you will hear us say is, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, not human beings having a spiritual experience. Yes, that's a paradox too. Here's a biggie from our times talking about abundance and prosperity. This is a universe of infinite abundance, infinite goodness, and infinite prosperity. Okay. But you have to be willing to accept it. You have to believe you deserve it. You have to let it in. You have to welcome it. You have to allow it. You have to embrace it. Otherwise, it goes right on by you down the road. Doesn't mean that you don't, there's no shares. It's infinite. You can have as much as you want, but you gotta want it, and you gotta believe you're entitled to it. That's another paradox. And they're all over. They are all over. One of my favorites is, we have 2 eyes, we have 2 ears. Do you know you have 2 minds? And you go, oh, no, Tom, I've only got 1 brain. Well, the brain is not your mind. You have 2 minds. You have the mind of this physical material world, which I call your head space. That's your analytical mind. That's your logical mind. It's also the place where your ego lives. It's the place where your anger comes from. It's the place where your fear, your doubt, all of those things, your judgments, they all come from your head space. You also have a mind here, your heart space. And that's your feeling mind. That's your love. That's your listening, your compassion, your caring, your understanding. And we get the choice every day. Actually, many, many times every day. Which do I want to use? Do I want to use this head space? Do I want to use this heart space? Now, I can tell you, in my earlier careers, as a Marine and as a lawyer, I spent a lot of time here, in the head space. It was necessary for those careers, to the point where I almost forgot that I had a heart space. So when I came to Science of Mind, I was absolutely bowled over. And I still engage in what I heard referred to this morning as spiritual rain. When you sang, "You are the face of God," I got tears in my eyes. You don't say those things when you're operating from your headspace. So those are the part of the paradoxes that we are already experiencing. I'm going to touch probably longer than I need to, but just briefly on one that you're going to be hearing more about. Centers for Spiritual Living is doing a great deal of teaching of its ministers and its practitioners right now on the subject of diversity. The Diversity and Inclusion Commission is teaching us a lot about privilege. Now, the first part of the teaching is on white privilege, but there are many things, there are many biases, there are many privileges, and you want you to understand that when we talk about this, what we're finding out is many of us were not aware of it. Think of this country. Think of our culture here. We are generally in continental United States largely a population of people with, and I would call it white, but I hate the use of that term because there is no white pigmentation to our skin. It's just various shades of color. But we'll call it white. Did you know that when you look at white and other colors, people of other colors, that the majority of the people who classify as white are in the continental United States, Canada, and Western Europe? And guess what? We only make up about 10% of the population of the world. Everyone else is people of colors, but we don't think of it. Think of this country. White people came here from Europe. There weren't white people living here. What did we do to them? We ran them off and we killed them. And we established this country that has what Ernest Holmes refers to as race consciousness. I prefer to use the collective unconscious or the subjective mind. And we have 400 or more years embedded in us in this culture of whites are special. Now that's not to say none of us have ever had any difficulties in our lives. We just have not experienced difficulties that came about by the pigmentation of our skin. People of color have, and we don't see it. We're born into it. We didn't choose it. But without looking at it, without knowing, we can perpetuate it. I can't share in the experiences people of color have had growing up. No matter if I could turn back time to when I was born, I cannot live those experiences because even in their community, I would still have light skin. I would never have their experiences, and they can't have mine. But I read a very interesting article here just recently, It was, let me get the guy's name correctly, a fellow by the name of Kyle Korver. And Kyle Korver is an athlete. He's a member of the Utah Jazz basketball team in the NBA. And he said it got him to thinking. He wrote an article entitled Privileged, and it got him to thinking 3/4 of the players in the NBA are people of color. And as things would happen to teammates and friends that were people of color, it got him to thinking. He says, why aren't those things happening to me? It didn't happen to him because he had pigmentation like mine. And he said in this article, I don't have the answer to this, but I know there are 2 things I can do. And this is what I want you to remember. He says, there are 2 things I can do. He says, the first thing I can do is when they speak, when they talk, I listen from my heart, not from my head. And I hear from my heart their feelings, their experiences. And I care for them. I exhibit compassion by listening to their feelings. And he says, the second thing I can do, I can hold myself accountable to not continue this course of behavior that we have fallen into without realizing it, of whites are better. And I can hold others accountable when I see them act that way. Now you might ask, say, Tom, if there's paradoxes in the world, how can we be peacemakers? Particularly if we don't even see everything coming down the road. And I'm going, well, you can be a peacemaker, but there's some things you have to accept. One of the first things you have to accept, and most of us have heard the Serenity Prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr. And it says, God, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And if any of you have been to a 12-step meeting more than once or twice, and I have, quite often there will be someone who will pipe up right then and say, the past, situations of circumstances, and other people. Other people. We can't change other people. So when we see things happening and they're wrong, I can hold people accountable, but I can't change them. It's not within my power to change them. The past, situations and circumstances, and other people. That's where your spirituality comes out. And that's where the rubber meets the road. And you have the choice to go to your head space or your heart space and act from there. Another thing that you have to accept is you really are a unique, individualized expression of the love intelligence that governs the universe. You are the very thought of a loving God manifesting as love in this physical form that we call you, that we see here in every seat. That's who you are. You are God in action. But another thing you have to remember is every person, every single person, is a physical manifestation of the divine. And you are one with them, and they are one with you. Now I'm going to tell you, that's a toughie to live. It is for me, because when that person out there is doing something or saying something, and it just tightens my jaw, and it really makes my blood boil, it's really difficult for me to say, I'm one with them, and they're one with me. It's a tough practice, but it's one that comes from that heart space, not the head space. And I want you to always keep in your mind, as you focus on things, when we're focusing out there, you know, the law of cause and effect says whatever's out there is effect. It's not cause. The cause is in here. It's effect. When I'm focusing on effect, it's more easy for me to think from my headspace. It's more easy for me to pass judgment. When I can stop myself and quit looking so much at the effect and start looking at the cause, which one of us, them or me, is separating ourselves from the divine when I'm in my headspace, then I can look from my heart space and I can say, okay, I can't change them, but I can change me and how I react and how I'm going to act because of what they're saying or what they're doing. I can now act from my heart space. How do you have the courage to be a peacemaker in this world? Look at the news every day. Doesn't make you feel that this is a very peaceful world in most cases, does it? How do you find the courage to be a peacemaker, to step out there and be that person? Well, Ernest Holmes teaches us that every person, every single one of us, came into this life with a purpose, with lessons to learn, with gifts to give. And as you grow in spiritual awareness, as you develop your intuition, as you listen through that intuition to the divine, you'll be guided to fulfilling that purpose every day. Now that's what it means to become authentic. And being authentic, being your authentic self, allows you to demonstrate and be a peacemaker. That's what courage is. Courage is your standing for truth. Truth with a capital T. By being your authentic self. And every one of you has an authentic self. You may not always know it. You may not always realize what it is. Some of us are slow learners. It took me 2 other careers before I finally got it. And I don't know how much time I have in this physical realm to share this truth. But all I can do is share it as best I can, as long as I have. And the same is true for each one of you. The same is true. So, how do you become a peacemaker? You be your authentic self. You are the light of love and peace, every one of you, everywhere you go. You have that choice every day to touch every other person's life with love and peace, and you don't even have to be in their presence. You can hold them in their consciousness. You can hold them in your prayer. It is your ability to be the light of love and peace. Now, what does it mean really to be your authentic self? Well, that's truly who you are. Ernest Holmes says it's your self-awareness. It's always in you. It's always with you. It always is you. And it appears as you. You know when you're not acting like your authentic self because you just don't feel right. But those times that you're present and you're standing in the truth and you have this warm feeling that I know I did the right thing. That's it. That's a clue. That's a clue. You see, it's only your fear, thinking from your headspace, that can hold you back from being your authentic self, from stepping forward and taking that step. Now, sometimes we need a little help. Spirit is there all the time to guide us, to direct us, to help us along our way. I call them divine nudges. For me, it tends to be a little more like an elbow poke in the side. And I don't always listen. We don't always listen, do we? I don't. So periodically then, Spirit breaks out the spiritual 2x4 and whacks me upside the head and says, Tom, you are not listening. And that's usually when I get the message. And I go, okay, you got my attention now. And then we launch off and be authentic. I tell you that so that you'll know, being authentic, there's going to be disappointments. You're going to stumble. You're going to get discouraged at times. You're going to show up as love and peace, and there's going to be those in the world who go, get out of here. That's okay. You keep going, you keep trying, you keep taking the next step. Because there's two things I want you to remember. Dr. Maya Angelou said, God puts a rainbow in every cloud. Now, she didn't say God puts a rainbow in the sky and there's lots of other clouds. Just, no. Every cloud. God has a rainbow in it. You find that rainbow because that's your strength. That's Spirit speaking to you, giving you hope. And the other thing, and this also comes from recovery, is remember this is a daily practice. You don't show up today and be a peacemaker and then you get to take a week off. No. You show up. It works if you work it. And the more you work it, the better it works. And you keep at it and you keep doing it. Now, why does it work that way? Why does it work that way? Well, it works, and I've lost track of time, so if I'm running past time, somebody tell me. But why does it work that way? Well, remember that you are an example. You are a role model. You are the person that other people teach. Now, that's our best teaching method. People see what you do, and they learn from it. That is who you are. I can tell you things all day long. I can stand here and talk, and it wouldn't mean a thing if when I walk out this door, I'm not living what I tell you. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, what you're doing speaks so loud that I can't hear what you're saying. Okay. So I invite you to step out. Be that authentic self. Show that truth. In this world of paradoxes, you be that truth, walking this earth, and let people watch. Let people look at you and go, I don't know what you've got, but I want it. And then you bring them here. And we'll all work together and teach together and learn together, because we're all still learning and we're all still growing. You know, you're the light of the world. Jesus said that also in the Sermon on the Mount. You are the light of the world. Let your light so shine. All right? Your light always is shining. How brightly are you going to let it shine as you step in the world, as you walk through the world? As you're walking, you're talking, we've all seen the bumper stickers and things that say, be the change. And we like to say, well, Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Not exactly what he said, but it's pretty close. Let me see here. He said, if we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. And what he's saying is, personal transformation and social transformation take place together. Not one or the other, they're interrelated. We change ourselves, we change the world. So I invite you, I'm going to conclude now, I invite you to, as you walk out in the world, live your purpose. Whatever your purpose is. I don't know what your purpose is, but you really know it if you're willing to let Spirit tell it to you. Live that purpose. Be your authentic self. Because that is your truth, and that is the greatest truth. Let your light shine before others. The second point. Let your light shine before others. Why? Because there's no one else like you. You're an individualized expression of the divine. And you are special. Every one of you. You can't be me, I can't be you. But the world would not be the same without both of us. And finally, I'm telling you this, third point, the world needs your light and your love. You're special, your light, your love are special. The world needs it, and it needs it right now. In fact, your light and your love are the only things that will change the world. You are a peacemaker, and you're changing the world. And so it is.